Hi, I'm Tina Sikka. For this project, I was sort of the academic on the project, so putting together the theoretical framework and some of the logistics around setting up the methods as well.
I'm Kit. I work under the name Lady Kitt. I'm a socially engaged artist and I call the way that I work mess making as social glue. I'm dead interested in how art can be useful, and particularly over the last 4 years, I've been working on projects about social art and policy change and how those two things might interact. In this project, I've been an artist.
I'm Sarah Lee. Have worked with Kit for a number of years as a producer and was a producer on this project. And now I'm doing also an art installation for it as well.
Yeah, the project, we put it together to investigate the intersections between consent and sexual ethics and gender-based violence, and really trying to hone in on uh, exploring new forms of sexual relationality using arts-based workshops. So the workshops sort of consist of conversations around sexual ethics, and then also the crafting of paper objects. Our research question, which will kind of distill it a little bit more, was basically given our legal framework's inability to serve women, particularly ethically, and the limits of consent as a framework for sexual justice. Is it the model that we want and need, and what is the alternative?
Tina's research inspired me to do the project, but also Tina inspired me to do the project. We worked together before, and it's really exciting to work with a researcher who's so interested in and dedicated to how can we create multidisciplinary ways of working. So that was a really big bit of being involved in the project for me, is knowing that Tina was going to be involved and having had a really interesting, great time working together before. Um, I've got lived experience as well. That's part of the inspiration for wanting to be involved and for really feeling that things desperately need to change and to be different. And also reading Adrienne Maree Brown's book, Pleasure Activism, massively inspiring for this project, but for loads and loads of things that I do in work and life.
Yeah, well, I mean, I found out about the project through working with Lady Kitt previously and also having seen Tina and Kit's work together before this project. And so I just really enjoyed that exhibition that was about consent as well, and thought it was really good. And so I just wanted to get involved because of that, and also because I think it's a really important subject matter. And I thought that the way that it was like presented of how it would be done was really thoughtful. So I was really enthused about that, basically.
Yeah, I think one of the things that was really brilliant about the project is that the students who got involved, not only is it a multidisciplinary team like devising and delivering the project, but the students who got involved came from such a wide variety of different backgrounds. So the conversations that we had and also the work that people made during the sessions was really, really varied, really exciting, and came from such a vast, different variety of points of view and perspectives.
One of our outputs was a journal article, which is under review now. Actually, two of them. One was collaborative, but we found things I used thematic analysis to go through some of the transcripts and visual thematic analysis to do some analysis of the art. And we found certain themes coming up over and over again about how the consent model is ethnocentric, that it doesn't reflect the cultural backgrounds of the students, that it relies on gender sexual scripts that need to be challenged, ones that give men sexual agency, while women primarily function as gatekeepers, that it was really heteronormative, that it didn't account for mutual pleasure, things like it minimized and suppressed anger, And so these were all themes that came out in looking at some of the responses that were given to the questions that were asked, and also in the visual analysis of what was actually produced by the students.
I've seen Kit working with organisations and communities with the enSHRINE methodology, where they have worked with communities to shape policy for organisations. So when that's happened, we found that people were able to share their thoughts more freely, even if it was more difficult conversation, because in the arts side of stuff, they were able to be focused on more than one thing, which I think is a calming activity in itself. And so when Kit and Tina work together, it's sort of like having that methodological approach of working with the arts to have complex conversations, and then having like the breadth of Tina's research and just the amazing analysis that Tina's done to like present to the students to have those complex conversations. It felt like a good like collaboration in that sense, because it felt like both of their practices could really benefit the other. From my perspective, I felt like they really could sit well next to each other and start to intertwine. Yeah.
Even though my area is sort of more like theoretical, I was put in charge of fine art PhD students as well, just like navigating and making sure that their paperwork was in and everything. And I saw some of the work they were doing, and I was like, oh my gosh, I want to get involved in doing this creative practice so much. And so then I just started talking to different people about artists in the area, and I landed on Lady Kitt's website and was like looking at some of the stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to contact them. And I did. And we had like a coffee. And then we just started working on projects from there.
I think with all projects, the biggest challenge is how does everyone involved reach a point of understanding each other to start off with? And obviously, because Tina and I have worked together before, and Sarah and I have worked together before, there's already quite a level of like shared understandings there. But I think when you bring in an institution, that makes things more complicated, especially a big institution like a university. It has a very definite culture of its own and a way that stuff is sort of generally done, which first of all is just often really confusing for people who aren't involved in that every day. But also, and I think this is for all of us, there are things about those processes that we find challenging from the point of view of just practically how do we deal with this. But then there's also stuff that we find ethically challenging as well, and this project is sort of part of challenging that and thinking, how do we develop different ways of doing these things better, more useful, kinder, more care-filled ways. So I suppose that for me, that's probably one of the biggest challenges of this project, which is ongoing, which is like, how do a group of people who have quite a specific idea about ethics interact with a big institution that has really like old ways of doing things and dealing with things? How do we do that to make the project start happening? But then in the future, how do we do that to try and think about the ways that institutions can work in more kind of people-centric ways, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I would even take it a step forward, and some of my other work focuses on the university as a colonial institution of empire building, one that is, inherently racist and misogynistic. And I find that it is carving out spaces within a system that can be very hostile to people of color, to gender nonconforming people, to disabled people, that it becomes a bit of a battle. And so surrounding yourself with people who are on the same page as you and have an ability. I found Kit and Sarah both have a ability, and also our RA, Emma Atkinson, did just fantastic work. Have ability to create a space that is really, it's the only thing I can think of as a word is that it's like creative and capacious. Like it's just an environment where the students feel really relaxed and able to produce knowledge that um, is different from the kind of extractive knowledge you usually see from the university system. And that was something I was really wanting to get out of the workshops is that, yes, this is a project that is dealing with gender-based violence and trauma and lived experience, but it's not asking students to relive that trauma. And it is about using the lived experience to create new knowledge and new futures. And I think that the method that we went in with helped to do that.
I was just going to say, Tina, I think the thing you said about extractive methods and how we're all trying to work differently to that is like really, really important for me in all the stuff that I do. But it's been such a focus for this project, thinking about how do we genuinely co-design and co-create a research project, and how do we create as many points as possible within the project for people to check in with us and for us to check in with people to make sure that everyone understands what's happening and that they feel comfortable with it. And if they don't, they know how to talk to us about that, or like when and where are appropriate ways to bring those things up. And again, I think that Sarah has like Sarah's methodology, and that's been really, really important. I don't know, Sarah, if you wanted to talk a bit more about like practically how those check-ins and stuff have happened.
Yeah, well, I would say one of the biggest things for me was kind of at the beginning of the project was writing the consent form with everyone, which is a bit of, it sounds like a bit of a boring thing to talk about, but I actually find it kind of exciting because usually when I would think of academic spaces in particular, but also broadly across like the arts as well, I think we've mirrored some of the work methods that we've learned in institutional spaces, whether knowingly or not. And so it was kind of fun to sort of break that down and be like, what do we actually need from people? What can we ask them? And like really interrogate that initial sort of like response of like, oh, here's a carbon copy of a consent form that we usually have. And I think that I'm not trying to say we've perfected it, but it's more that because we haven't, in my opinion, but it's more that we've tried to really start to think about how it could be done differently. And I think that that initial invitation into the project with the form just shows at least a level of care that we genuinely have for the people coming into the project, so that that very initial, from the get-go, they know that what they feel and what they want to come out of the project really matters and is at the heart of it. So to me, that was really important and has made me wonder how could I progress that further going forwards in my own work as well. So yeah.
The installation online, we have a toolkit as well where we uploaded all of the materials that we used to like the consent form to the to the actual arts activity itself, to the slides that I used. All of that is available as a kind of toolkit for scholars who want to do this kind of research to replicate either the project itself or to take some of its techniques and bring it forward. We were clear in the consent forms and in the information packs that, and in also the advertising for the project, that this was a project that was built on lived experience, but it was not built on trauma or re-traumatization. So it was kind of that we wanted students that had experienced gender-based violence, but there would be no expectation for them to disclose or relive that trauma within the workshops. But it would be that in light of that experience of trauma, can we ask you these questions where we would kind of center them as the experts, and to ask them, what they thought was needed. That if we're going do a project on sexual ethics and have it revolve around gender-based violence, it has to center survivors and see what they want to see in sexual ethics.
I feel like some of the art methodologies that we used were quite well. I say I feel like, but actually the feedback from the students was that the art methodologies that we used were really helpful in actually embodying the fact that we really meant that. So I think it's easy to say, this is what we're thinking it's going to happen in a project, or this is our ambitions, and to write it down, or even to present it at the beginning of a session. But actually, we did some physical warm-up exercises, we did some breathing exercises, we talked a lot and played a lot with physical materials. And the student feedback was that that was very, very useful in helping them to feel centered, to feel calm, and I guess to basically believe us when we said we want this to be a calm, care-filled environment, and we don't want you to feel like you have to disclose anything that you don't want to, or in fact to say anything at all. If you just want to be here and listen to other people and interact with the materials, that's absolutely brilliant, and we're so happy that you've generously given us your time. And the feedback from the students was that those activities really did support them to actually feel like that in the space, and that was really great. And I think that, talking about like interdisciplinary ways of working, the way that Tina works is very you have like really specific ways of gathering that information. So you physically take notes, and then also you record it, and then all of that is transcribed afterwards. That's not the way that I work at all. Generally, I just randomly hear a little bit of something that somebody said and scribble it down and go, oh, that's interesting. But that thing of actually having a whole transcript of what people have said word for word during a session, some of it about the methodologies that we've used, and that being really, really positive, was fantastic. And it made me kind of step back and really think, oh, this is what a lovely way to be able to capture some of this feedback about how those methodologies actually feel to people. And that was really exciting bit of the project for me.
I want to say as well, there was specific feedback as well of saying things like making artwork while talking about this is good because I don't feel like everyone's looking at me while I'm talking about this. So just things like that, which was really nice to hear, that it was like, oh, that it is creating a space for conversation that is maybe sometimes quite a difficult conversation to have.
And I was so nervous that the participants wouldn't be able to simultaneously answer the questions and do the art at the same time. That it would be a kind of, distracted, and that wasn't the case at all. I found it the opposite, actually, and I was really surprised by that.
Yeah, I think as well, it also is really good at allowing people to be comfortable in silence. So I think people can be a little bit more thoughtful and reflective and take time to respond rather than feel like they have to answer straight away.
There was like an academic part of it, and then there was more of like the social space part of it. The scholarly part was to part of the book that I wrote last year, Sex, Consent, and Justice, a New Feminist Framework. Out of that, and one of the things that we talked about in detail in the workshops was an alternative model of sexual ethics that I came up with in the book. And that's a pleasure and care-centered ethic of embodied and relational sexual otherness. And so in these groups, we sort of talked about the various dimensions of the model, but also the possibility of it being something that could be integrated into contemporary sexual ethics. And to have students sort of talk about a model I spent so much time creating and questioning myself about, and having them sort of engage in a discussion of that perspective was really fruitful for me in terms of just thinking about what direction I want to take my research in going forward. And then in terms of the crafting, I'm not a crafter, and my artistic kind of, like, I have a minor in art history, so I have a kind of massive appreciation for art and craft, and like Kit calls the mess making that goes on, and the creative practice dimension of it. So just to be there and involved in that process, I just found so lovely. I just really was happy every time that we turned to the craft and I could see what students were doing.
That's so lush, Tina. Yeah, I think for me it's similar. Like there are two dimensions of things that were successful. There are things that are successful in a kind of methodological way that I'm taking forward to use in other projects. But then there's this idea of sort of community of practice, I guess, that Sarah and Tina and I have developed together and are continuing to develop, that feels really exciting, really useful, like really robust, but also, like Tina said, it's just really lovely. Like it's a really enjoyable way to work. And going to those sessions, some of it was hard, and people said things that was difficult to listen to, and I said stuff that I found difficult to say. But there was a really great atmosphere in the room when students were in the room with us, but also when we're in the room together. And that just makes a project feel so much more rich, I guess, when you can have a working practice together with other people that feels like that. It's great. Yeah.
It's been amazing for a number of reasons. I think the subject matter is really interesting and something that I'm really passionate about. So that's been really like exciting to get involved with. And I think like the multidisciplinary aspect of it, I just feel on a personal level that I've learned so much doing this project. I feel like my brain's exploded, but in a really good way, and it's had like quite a profound impact on me. And so like my kind of hope, and I feel like it is possibly the case, is that it will have had that impact on the students there, and I'm like happy to have been a part of that in some way. And I feel like I've done a lot of learning as well, which has been great for me. So thanks. Yeah. But also from the feedback, I do feel like it feels like other people have felt that it's had a positive impact on them too. And so I think it's a really exciting project to be part of. And also just really cool to see different disciplines coming together, because I think that that is where the secret of the impact kind of lies. And I want more interdisciplinary stuff to happen, because I think we have like different approaches to similar things, and when they come together we have multiple different ways of showing and presenting and digesting information that makes it easier to think of action plans and stuff like that. So I'm excited to see what more could happen. Yeah.
I got some additional funding to produce a policy brief and identify different policy actors like the National Association for Students and Sisters Uncut, but also EDI and gender-based violence offices in universities, to take all of the findings that we have and distill it into a policy brief and disseminate it, and engage in conversations with some of these policy actors. So there's that. And then I also, from the project and the findings, I was finding when I was writing the findings article, it was just getting too long. And I put together a book proposal that would be sort of based on doing a very in-depth analysis as a case study within a larger argument about sexual ethics, where the project would be a case study and I would do a little bit more analysis. And so that is under review as well. So that's kind of what I'm working on.
We will be doing an exhibition at Newcastle University, and it's on the campus, and we've been saying under the arches, which will make sense if you go to the campus, but I'm not sure it makes sense as an abstract thing. But anyway, that's on the 28th of April, and it will involve some video work that I've made in response to some of Tina's critiques of the consent model, but also from what some of the students have said during the sessions that I was present at. And then and also the performers in the video have said a lot that has made the work more nuanced and complex, which is interesting to me. But anyway, the video centers the idea of understanding physical cues during intimacy. So that's what the video is about, basically. And there'll also be a sculpture by Kitt, which is a deity that Kitt made for the digital exhibition initially, but is also going to be presented in the physical exhibition. And there'll also be a QR code to take people to that digital exhibition so they can see all of the student artworks as well.
As Tina mentioned, we've been chatting a bit about how the findings from the project might feed into more kind of tangible policy. And also from that work, I do a long running project for maybe like the last 3 or 4 years called enSHRINE, which is really specifically about how these kind of co-created social art methodologies can support organisations to do policy differently, and to do it in more fun, creative, interesting ways, but also to do it in more expanded ways so that it's not just one poor person who writes policy going off to an office every 6 months to like sit by themselves and drag through a load of boring policies, and that it can be kind of more interesting, more engaging, and also bring in many more voices and opinions about what a policy is, should be, can be, and also how that can sort of build cultural habits within an organisation. It's not just a document that then gets bunged in a file for the next 6 months and nobody ever thinks about it again. So that enSHRINE project, those methodologies have informed some of the ways that the three of us have worked together in this project. And this project is informing those methodologies again. And I'm taking those forward to work with an organisation in Newcastle called the Newbridge Project. And I'm doing a residency with them next month for a month. And that will be specifically thinking about how can we do creative activities together that also help us to talk about what policy is, and how everyone who interacts with an organisation can be involved in that in some way, be involved in creating those policies, but also be involved in maintaining the cultures that an organisation wants to be able to have through having the policies. So all the stuff that we've been chatting about today, particularly like toolkits and quite practical things like a version of the consent form and things, we've embedded those. I say we've embedded them, we haven't. We've been working with an amazing company called Art Matters Now, who've created a 3D scan of the installation that we made, and they've embedded those toolkits like some policy suggestions and consent forms, suggestions for creative activities, and all of those are embedded in that digital space. So you can go and navigate the space, have a look at the amazing artwork that the students have made.
I would also plug my book that I did last year as well, Sex, Consent, and Justice, a New Feminist Framework, with Edinburgh University Press. So that is available, and you can get a sort of background into the theoretical framework and also the methods that we use.